We grab a bunch of interesting sources, try and make sense of them for you.
Yep, save you the reading time.
Exactly. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Great to be here.
So today, we're looking at Taiwan. Things are getting, well, pretty interesting over there. We're seeing actual movements, people trying to remove Kuomintang, that's the KMT legislators, from their jobs.
Right, there's this Baji campaign in Bangkok.
Yeah, sounds kind of cool, Bazi. And this former military guy, Yu Chen, he's actually backing it.
Okay, so there's clearly something going on.
Right. So the big question is, what's this unease about? What's the deal with the KMT and Taiwan's national security? Have the party changed that much?
That's what we're digging into.
Right.
Our sources look at the KMT's ideology, how it's, evolved, their approach to China now, and what it all could mean for Taiwan.
Okay, so what's the plan?
Well, first, these public actions, like the recall campaigns. Why are people doing this?
Makes sense.
Then, the KMT itself. How did it get here? Why are people worried? We'll also touch on this maybe slightly provocative question some are asking. If the KMT is seen as so pro-China, why not just go there?
Ha! Okay. That's pretty direct.
And finally, a thought experiment. Let's say, hypothetically, Taiwan and China unify. What happens to the KMT then? Especially given, well, how the PRC treats other political parties.
Right. Not exactly a multi-party paradise over there. Okay, let's get into it. This KMT transformation.
Yeah, the sources really highlight some big ideological shifts. And this Yu Chen figure you mentioned, he used to be pretty high up in the KMT, apparently.
Oh, interesting. So he's got an inside perspective.
Seems like it. He talks about how back under Chiang Kai-shek and Chiang Ching-kuo, it was all about anti-communism, full stop.
Well, yeah, given the whole Civil War thing, that tracks. They weren't exactly friends.
Not at all. But then, Yu Chen says, during Lee Teng-hui's presidency, the focus sort of shifted. It became more about being anti-Taiwan independence.
Okay. Subtle shift, but important.
Very. And Yu Chen's worry now is that this current anti-Taiwan independence stance, well, it might actually align too closely with Xi Jinping's views.
How so?
Because Xi Jinping fundamentally opposes the existence of the Republic of China itself, Taiwan's official name. So if the KMT's main thing is anti-independence, is it still defending the ROC or just echoing Beijing's line against a separate Taiwan?
I see the nuance. It's not just about independence in the abstract. It's about whose independence or existence is being opposed.
Exactly. Yu Chen says, for him, back when he was in the military, being anti-Taiwan independence meant being anti-communist. It was about stopping the communists from taking over Taiwan and creating their own separate communist state there, wiping out the ROC.
So the enemy was always communism.
For him, yes. He argues the real fight wasn't like unification versus independence as ideas, but the actual concrete struggle, democratic freedom versus communist control.
That feels like a really crucial distinction.
It is, and he maps out how he sees the KMT's focus changing over time, went from that strong anti-communism to anti-Taiwan independence.
Okay.
Then, more recently, kind of anti-green, meaning anti-DPP, the current ruling party.
Got it.
And even narrowing down to being anti-Lai Ching-te, the current president. He sees it as drifting away from that core anti-communist principle.
So it becomes more about domestic politics than the fundamental threat, in his view.
That seems to be his interpretation. He even recalls the military's official mission changing. It used to be recover the mainland, big ambition.
Yeah, that was the line for decades.
Then it shifted to defend Taiwan, Penghu, Kinmen, and Matsu, the islands under ROC control. That's a very tangible change in focus.
Definitely grounds the mission right there in Taiwan.
And he connects this defense idea to real events, like the 1996 Taiwan Strait crisis. He was there, saw it unfold.
Oh, wow. What did he take from that?
His big takeaway. You can't rely on your enemy's goodwill for peace. Taiwan needs its own strong military. Self-reliance is key.
That sounds like a military perspective for sure. Makes sense.
And it feeds into his view of the ROC's history in stages. Stage 1. Arriving in Taiwan in 1949 after losing the mainland.
Right, the retreat.
Stage 2, the ROC in Taiwan, sort of establishing itself.
Okay.
And Stage 3, where he thinks they are now, the ROC is Taiwan. A fusion of identity, a new sense of purpose rooted in the island.
So the KMT's identity, or maybe the ROC's identity through his eyes, went from exiled mainland government to something intrinsically Taiwanese and democratic.
That's a good way to put it. And central to that is his point. Only those defending Taiwan, Penghu, Kinmen, and Matsu, the ROC territory, actually enjoy democratic freedoms among, well, all Chinese people worldwide.
That's a strong statement. It ties defense directly to freedom.
Very much so.
Yeah.
He even calls himself Hua Taiwanese.
What does that mean? Hua, like Chinese?
Yeah, Hua for Chinese heritage, but Taiwanese, because he grew up there, identifies with the place. His definition of Taiwanese is pretty open, too.
Yeah.
Basically, anyone who loves Taiwan contributes to it and puts its democratic freedom and security first.
Sounds pretty inclusive. But he's critical of the KMT now.
Oh, yeah. He slams their strategic ambiguity on cross-strait relations, calls it strategic cowardice.
Okay, strategic ambiguity. That's the KMT policy of not being crystal clear on unification versus independence, right? Keep Beijing guessing, maybe.
That's the idea, yeah. Maintain flexibility. But Youytube Chen argues it's cowardly because, in his view, they aren't taking a firm, unambiguous stand for democratic freedom against the PRC threat.
And this stance got him into trouble with the party.
He says he felt pushed out, yeah, because he wouldn't stop emphasizing the need to oppose communism clearly.
That's a fundamental disagreement.
Absolutely. For him, a soldier's loyalty isn't to a party, it's to defending Taiwan, the islands, the democratic system under the ROC Constitution, period.
Drawing a clear line.
And that's why he gets really angry about some current KMT legislators. He points out instances where instead of condemning PRC military drills or pressure, they actually blamed Taiwan's own government for provoking Beijing.
Oof. That does sound like it echoes Beijing's narrative.
That's exactly his point. He sees it as a huge red flag. It's why he even supports bringing back military trials for things like sedition or desertion to ensure loyalty and discipline.
Okay, so linking it back to the recall efforts, the Baji campaign.
Right. Youytube Chen sees these recalls as necessary. He basically says it's a way to help the KMT purify itself.
Purify? How?
By removing legislators he sees as too cozy with the CCP, too scared to stand up to them, or maybe even actively helping Beijing's agenda through legislation.
Wow. That's a strong take from a former member.
He even says the KMT should thank the recall organizers for trying to get rid of the problematic elements and strengthen the party.
Thank them. That's bold.
He definitely doesn't mince words, but he also stresses how tough this recall process is, especially the second stage, getting enough signatures. It's a high bar.
And if they fail, if someone like Ya Yuanqi, who's being targeted, survives the recall.
Youytube Chen is worried. He thinks it would embolden the KMT and the TPP, another opposition party in the legislature, maybe push policies he feels endanger Taiwan.
So there's a real sense of urgency for him.
Huge urgency. She says they can't wait 4 years for the next election. The recall, using signatures and votes, is the only democratic way right now, he argues, to defend Taiwan's freedoms.
And again, it comes back to that core theme for him.
Yes. It's not just unification versus independence. It's democratic freedom versus communist autocracy. That's the battle line. Okay,
so that's Youytube Chen's perspective, which is pretty detailed. How does it line up with the broader analysis in our other sources?
It lines up quite well, actually. The other texts also analyze this ideological shift in the KMT. They point to that weakening anti-communist stance over time and, an increasing alignment with PRC narratives on some specific issues.
The sources give historical context for that.
They do. They mention the strong anti-communism under the Qiangs, with that goal of unifying China under the 3 principles of the people.
Right. Sun Yat-sen's principles, nationalism, democracy, people's livelihood. Very different from communism.
Totally different. That was the KMT's defining goal for a long time. Then, Li Tenghui's era, the focus shifts to anti-Taiwan independence. This happened as Taiwan was democratizing, and internationally, more countries were recognizing the PRC, not the ROC.
So the ground shifted under their feet, politically and diplomatically.
Exactly. It made their traditional one China claim much more complicated.
And then after President Ma Ying-jeou,
that's when the sources point to a clearer pro-China lean. Things like the ECFA trade deal, more high-level meetings between KMT figures and CCP officials, a warmer, closer relationship.
So specific examples of this pro-China leaning.
Well, the big one is the 1992 consensus. The KMT sticks to this idea.
Explain that again quickly.
Sure. The KMT interprets it as one China, different interpretations. Because both sides agree there's one China, but they can disagree on what that China is, ROC versus PRC. But the criticism is that this position has increasingly blurred into accepting Beijing's one China principle as the basis for eventual unification under the PRC. The sources mention Han Kuo-yu, a major KMT figure, really stressing Taiwan's economic dependence on the mainland, which fits that narrative.
So it's subtle shifts in emphasis that worry people.
Sometimes subtle, sometimes less so. The sources cite KMT positions that directly mirrored CCP lines. Like during the 2021 referendums, some KMT criticism of importing U.S. pork lined up with Beijing's opposition to closer U.S.-Taiwan ties.
And there was something during recent military drills, too.
Yeah, in 2024, when the PRC held massive drills around Taiwan, the KMT caucus secretary general at the time, Lin Suming, called for PRC restraint, but also said the drills made Taiwanese lose faith in the mainland.
Okay, seems mild.
Critics argued it didn't strongly condemn the PRC's aggression and sort of implied Taiwan might share some blame for the tension, which again sounds a bit like Beijing's framing.
And the media plays a role here too, right?
Yeah.
The idea of red media.
Definitely. The sources mention pro-unification media outlets in Taiwan, sometimes called red media, that often have ties to KMT factions and push narratives very similar to the CCP's official line. Shaping public opinion is key.
Is there data to back this up, not just anecdotes?
There is. A 2024 survey from Taiwan's National Defense Security Academy found that Pan-Blue supporters, mostly KMT voters, showed lower sensitivity to PRC military threats compared to other groups.
Lower sensitivity. Interesting. What about public opinion on KMT policy?
A 2023 poll by the Taiwan Public Opinion Foundation found only 28% approved of the KMT's cross-strait policy, and 56%, clear majority, thought it was too pro-China and risked Taiwan's security.
Wow, 56%. That's significant disapproval.
It is. And Taiwan's own Mainland Affairs Council, the MAC, has reported on the CCP's strategy using carrots and sticks, basically to influence pro-China groups and KMT figures in Taiwan to push for unification.
Okay, so this all inevitably leads back to national security concerns, and the defense budget seems central.
Hugely central. Yu Beichin was critical, and the source is elaborate. There was a proposed cut of over $20 billion in the 2025 budget, hitting defense significantly.
What was the KMT's rationale for that?
They argued they were targeting non-essential items to protect welfare spending. But critics, obviously, worried about the impact on military readiness.
And there were legislative actions, too, blocking budget stuff.
Yes, in March 2025, the sources say the KMT and TPP blocked reconsideration of the budget and a fiscal law. The defense minister at the time, Gu Lixiong, stated this directly forced cutbacks in U.S. training programs and ammunition purchases.
Cutbacks in U.S. training. That sounds serious.
Very serious. It potentially affects modernization and interoperability. It also reportedly led to delays in getting key equipment like F-16V jets, HIMARS rocket systems, and M1A2T tanks.
Has anyone outside Taiwan noticed this?
Oh, yeah. U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan called the budget cuts a dangerous game back in March 2025. Kirk Campbell, then nominee for Deputy Secretary of Defense, also expressed concern. Even the Trump administration had pushed Taiwan to spend more on defense and watched the KMT's leanings closely.
So how does Taiwan's spending compare internationally?
Well, SIC-TRI data for 2023 showed Taiwan spent about 2.5% of its GDP on defense. That's lower than some other places facing similar threats, like Israel or South Korea.
And this is happening while PRC military activity is increasing.
Exactly. Taiwan's own M&D reported over 2,000 PRC aircraft incursions into the ADIZ and more naval patrols in 2024. Public support for more defense spending is high 72% overall in one 2024 survey, though only 45% among Pan-Blue voters.
So there's a disconnect between overall public opinion and Pan-Blue opinion on defense spending.
Seems that way. The KMT defends the cuts as targeted, but critics, like an association for Taiwanese investors who lost money in China, argue freezing budgets kills the M&D's flexibility to respond to threats.
What are the broader security concerns beyond the budget?
Well, the risk of aligning with PRC narratives, like we discussed. Blocking bills, like one targeting pensions for military personnel, found loyal to the CCP, opposing some arms purchases.
And consistency. Is the KMT united on defense?
Sources suggest not entirely. Different leaders, different factions, sometimes different messages, which makes it hard to know their definitive stance.
And the potential threat to democratic freedoms.
There are concerns, yeah, that some KMT figures might support laws seen as favorable to Beijing, like maybe opposing efforts to strengthen laws against foreign interference, like the anti-infiltration law.
Okay, this paints a complex picture. It definitely explains the unease in those recall efforts.
It does.
Which brings us back to that blunt question. If the perception is that the KMT is so pro-China, why don't they just relocate to the mainland?
Right, and the simple answer, based on the sources and reality, is the CCP wouldn't let them exist as an independent party there.
Because it's a one-party state.
Yeah. Exactly. Any other so-called political parties in the PRC have to accept CCP leadership. They have no real power. They're mostly for show, part of the United Front.
Plus, the history isn't exactly friendly, is it? Civil War and all that.
Deep historical animosity. The CCP talks to the KMT now, yes, but it's strategic. It's part of that United Front work trying to influence Taiwan, promote peaceful unification on their terms, weaken support for Taiwan independence. It's not about sharing power.
They use KMT figures for forums and things, but it's CCP-driven.
Precisely. It's about advancing Beijing's goals. There's zero indication the CCP would allow the KMT to operate independently on the mainland. History shows that 2 KMT figures who joined the CCP side in 1949 didn't maintain a separate KMT structure. They were absorbed.
So the idea of the KMT just moving shop to the mainland is a non-starter.
Completely unrealistic.
So let's do that thought experiment. If unification did happen, what's the fate of the KMT?
Based on everything we've discussed, the most likely outcome is disappearance. Forced disbandment seems probable. Or maybe transformation into something like the KMT Revolutionary Committee that exists on the mainland, now totally subservient to the CCP. There's also the fundamental clash of ideologies.
The ROC versus the PRC idea.
Exactly. The KMT's identity is tied to the Republic of China. The CCP's one country, two systems is based on the PRC being the sole legitimate government. They are mutually exclusive.
And Beijing's been clear that ROC symbols, constitution, party system wouldn't continue?
Very clear. Their 2022 white paper on Taiwan stated that explicitly.
So, pathways to demise. Forced dissolution, becoming a puppet party.
Yeah.
What else?
Internal splits. The KMT isn't monolithic. You have more localist wings, more pro-China wings. Unification would likely shatter the party. Some might resist. Some might try to form new parties. Some might get absorbed into the CCP system without power.
But wait. The KMT leadership now gets its power from Taiwan's democracy, right? Elections, voters?
That's the irony, isn't it? Their current political relevance depends entirely on the democratic system they operate within in Taiwan. And they do, at least officially, commit to the ROC.
And even the pro-unification folks in the KMT, they usually frame it under the ROC banner, don't they?
Generally, yes. And internal KMT reports apparently suggest just maintaining the status quo is the most practical policy for now. Plus, you have their voters.
Right. You said polls show most KMT supporters identify as Taiwanese and prefer the status quo.
Exactly. And the Hong Kong situation hasn't exactly built trust in Beijing's peaceful unification promises, even among potential KMT supporters. They see what happened there.
So the pro-China image is actually hurting them electorally.
The sources suggest it is. So put it all together. Unification likely means that KMT is forced to disband or become powerless. It splits internally and loses whatever public support it had left in Taiwan.
Grim outlook for the party in that scenario. Are there any ways they could try to avoid that fate, hypothetically?
Well, maybe accelerate localization, really embrace a distinct Taiwanese identity, try to negotiate with the CCP for some kind of genuine autonomy post-unification, though that seems unlikely to succeed.
Very unlikely, given everything.
Or maybe the party completely fractures and reorganizes into something new before unification even happens, trying to adapt to the political realities.
Okay, so wrapping this up. We've seen the worries about the KMT's direction, the shift away from strong anti-communism, the alignment with some PRC talking points.
Yeah, and the real-world impact on things like the defense budget and national security perceptions.
And then the stark conclusion that if unification ever happened under Beijing's terms, the KMT as an independent party would almost certainly be finished. Because of the CCP system, and also because the KMT itself relies on Taiwan's democracy for its existence.
That really covers the core points from the sources, yeah.
So the final thought for you, the listener, is this. Setting aside the big if of unification for a moment, how do these dynamics play out going forward? How can, or how will, the KMT try to adapt? Can they regain trust and maintain relevance when facing these deep concerns about their ideology and its impact on Taiwan's future?
Definitely something to keep watching. The political landscape in Taiwan is constantly evolving, and the KMT's path will be a major factor.
And you know what? If you're looking for a little more adventure inspiration, our friend's YouTube channel, Mickytolife, is the perfect place to find it.
Oh yeah, he's got amazing travel stories, whiskey reviews, and all sorts of fun stuff to get you in the mood for exploration.
Thanks for joining us on Sip and Talk.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.